ABA Inside Track, the podcast that's like reading in your car, but safer. I'm your host, Robert Perry Cruz, and with me are my fabulous co-hosts.
I'm Diana.
And I'm Jackie.
Hi, guys. Welcome to episode 7.
Woo.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for being here.
In the studio.
So, tonight we are going to talk about trial-based functional analyses. Now, functional analyses are kind of the hot topic.
Hot topic.
These days. This one is not quite the hottest part of them, but I think it is one that is kind of on the forefront of a lot of practitioner minds. I think we all agree that the standard FA has sort of been the gold standard, the standard bearer for many, many, many years. However, I think a lot of the surveys going around these days are pointing to not many people use them in practice or not use them when they should. So, okay, our choices are either yell at people and tell them you need to use them, or figure out how can we make the standard FA easier to use, but still keep, its strengths. We're going to work on those questions by reading our 2 articles for today. The first article we're going to do is Trial-Based Functional Analysis and Functional Communication Training in an Early Childhood Setting by Lambert, Bloom, and Irvin from Journal of Applied Behavior Analysis 2012, Volume 45. And the second article will be Validating Trial-Based Functional Analyses in Mainstream Primary School Classrooms by Austin, Groves, Reynish, and Francis from Journal of Applied Behavior Analysis 2015, Volume 48. Before we get started, have either of you run one of the trial-based functional analyses, either, say, based on one of these articles or sort of the original kind of Sigafus, Saggers setup?
I have run 3 to 5 discrete trial.
Forgot a few of them.
Functional analysis.
There's some drunk trial-based FAs. Yeah. Can't quite remember them all.
No, I've done 3 successfully, 2 unsuccessfully due to my inadequate preparation of test conditions and control conditions.
Gotcha.
So I've successfully completed 3 discrete trial FAs and was able to implement treatment based on those FAs with success.
Awesome.
Woo-woo!
How about you, Dinah?
Nicely done.
Thanks.
No.
I wrote up a killer protocol based on one of these articles and then was not able to implement it. I was very sad because I've never actually run one, and I really wanted to see how it went and, kind of work the kinks out and then, really, really run a good analysis for the student. But alas, it was not meant to be. So I have written, I think, 2 protocols for them now, but I have yet to run a single one of them.
One of mine actually was in a public school, and it was sneaky because I said I was running an assessment but didn't call it a functional analysis. Mm-hmm. I just called it an assessment, and so I got it under the radar because they didn't allow functional analyses in the public school, but they did allow assessment of problem behavior. So I was like, I'm just going to run this assessment in the classroom.
Let's go, Jay. I want to come back to that when we pull into the dissemination station, because I think that is an important distinction, an important point when talking about for those of us working in Massachusetts, which I know is not everybody. So hold that thought. I definitely want to talk about that.
Cool.
Before we get into the articles, does anyone want to give our listeners the elevator pitch on the trial-based FA?
Yeah, so I actually love the seminal article, the Sigafus and Saggers 1995 article. Just like Tin Canny, if you listen to our previous Social Stories episodes, I would also like to marry Jeff Sigafus so that my name could be Jackie Sigafus.
That's got a nice ring to it.
I know, doesn't it?
It does.
Hello, Mrs. Sigafus.
You want to be Jackie Saggers?
No. It's not as...
Doesn't roll off the tongue quite
Sure.
the same.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't really. I tried to write it out once with a little heart. Didn't work. Jackie Sigafus does, though. It works with the heart. So what the trial-based FA is it's a FA, so it's an assessment of problem behavior that can be run in the classroom. And the conditions are set up around regularly scheduled activities, and the test and control condition are around 2 minutes long. And one nice thing about using the discrete trial FA is that problem behavior only needs to occur once in the test condition, and then the condition is over. So that's pretty nice. Yeah.
Okay. Now, Jackie, you keep referring to it as discrete trial FA versus trial FA. There's no difference between the two terms, right?
I don't think so, no. Yeah, I don't think
that
so.
You know
I think
of?
they're interchangeable.
Okay.
Okay.
I've seen trial FA in articles I've read recently, but I wouldn't think there'd be any difference between
No, here they say the one recent adaptation to the traditional FA is the trial-based FA, and they actually reference Sigafus and Sagers in 95, and that's... They called it a discrete trial FA, but it does actually make more sense to call it a trial-based FA because some of the conditions aren't within discrete trial, such as a tangible condition, which could be at like the snack table.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So here we're not measuring latency to response.
Nope.
Just occurrence versus non-occurrence.
Yep, and then you're looking
the
at
conditions.
and then looking at percentage of problem behavior within each
overall condition.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now that we have a bit of a background, we have two articles that extend that original research. So the first article we're going to talk about is trial-based functional analysis in the early childhood setting using functional communication training. And so, Jackie, you pulled the straw on that one. So why don't you tell us about the article?
Yeah, so this one used the trial-based functional analysis within a special education setting, and it was run by the teacher. And then...
The classroom teacher.
The classroom teacher, yep.
The itinerant special education teacher, I believe.
The itinerant special education... The hobo special education teacher. And then following the completion of the FA, they used the results to design function-based treatments and then determined if they were effective or not. Yeah, so before we begin talking about it...
That's all we got.
That's all we got. See you later, guys. I want to give a good shout-out to Joe Lambert. He's our friend.
Hey, Joe.
Hey, Joe. Diane and I semi-advised him during his master's thesis.
That's right.
Not this, but hey, Joe.
He's a behavioral momentum fellow.
What up, buddy? Anyway. They used two participants, two girls again, 3 to 4 years old. They had developmental delays and were receiving special education services. And they communicated using gestures, one-word phrases, and such. Oh, and I think there was a Danny, too. 2 girls and a boy.
And a pizza place.
Oh, wait. That's what I was going to say.
Oh, Danny.
I stole your joke. Haha.
There were 3 participants included in this study, 2 girls and a boy, around 3 to 4 years old. They were diagnosed with a developmental delay and were receiving special education services. They communicated using gestures, picture cards, one-word phrases, and the special education teacher was working on her master's degree in special education. She served as the therapist during the trial-based FA, and we do love that she was called itinerant.
Yes.
So I wonder what happened there. I mean,
she just rolled into town one day.
It's like a Nicholas Sparks novel, really.
With a little, patchwork suitcase. She's like, you got any work around here?
I'm going to be the special education teacher in this classroom.
I'm going to make a difference, damn it.
She had her umbrella like Mary Poppins. But what I love here is that they required her to read the Bloom et al. 2011 article on trial-based FAs. They gave her behavioral skills training with role-playing, trials, performance feedback until she performed without errors for each trial type. They ran the study right in the preschool center. They didn't have to take the kids out of the center. They ran it just in the typical special education classroom. So that's cool. One thing I love about this article is that they did include procedural fidelity. Mm-hmm. So that's something that I've been really toting lately.
Yeah, man.
In all my classes, and whenever I talk to anyone, I'm like, "Oh, did you do integrity data?" And they're like, "What?" I'm like, "Come on, do it." And they are, and that was awesome. And they got really high percentages. 96% was their mean, so that's really nice. Wow. Yeah. So they modified their trial-based FA off of Bloom et al.'s 2011 trial-based FA, where they used attention, escape, tangible, and an ignore condition. So one thing that they did differently from the Bloom in 2011 was they only used one control segment before the test segment. What Bloom et al. Had done was done a control test and a control, but they found that there was carryover effects in that last control session, so they took that out for this one. They also conducted a multiple stimulus without replacement preference assessment, to identify highly preferred items to use in the tangible condition and moderately preferred items to use in the attention condition. And they did 10 to 12 trials per week. And like I said before, they were embedded in regular scheduled activities. So what it looked like was each condition was 2 minutes in length, and the control condition was the control condition of whatever was going to happen in the test condition. So if it was an attention condition in the test, the control condition would just have the MO for attention absent.
Right.
So they would probably give attention continuously for the full 2 minutes, unless problem behavior occurred. If problem behavior occurred, the control condition ended and the test condition started.
Makes sense.
Or the segment, I guess what they're calling it, started. Yeah, and so the nice thing I like is that when problem behavior occurred in the test segment, that ended the trial. So we didn't see an exorbitant amount of problem behavior occurring in the naturalistic setting. The trial ended, and then they moved on with their lives.
They just deliver the consequence that one time, and then done.
Yep. And then they did these ignore trials, and those actually were the full 2 minutes testing control, and they repeated no ignore to see if it would persist across both trials. So that was the only difference between all of the sessions. And then once they conducted the trial-based FA, they used a multiple baseline design to evaluate the effects of FCT. And they had the baseline condition where they had the segment of the trial-based FA was the baseline, the one that was the highest. And then they used the FCT plus extinction. For FCT, they developed an intervention that taught the participants the appropriate function-based response based on the FA. So But
what were the results?
Let me tell you!
Wait a minute. Before you get to those results, I'd like to share this episode's secret code word number 1.
Oh.
So if you are listening to this episode for continuing education credits, you will need to know 2 secret codes. The first secret code of the episode is Mexico. Mexico. Our neighbor south of the border, Mexico. Only if you're in the United States, though. If you're somewhere else, that is wrong geographically.
It's the country below the United States.
Mexico. Mexico. And without further ado, let's hear those delightful results.
Yay! So one thing I love about trial-based FAs or discrete trial-based FAs is the graphs are bar graphs. I love myself some bar graphs.
No, line graphs. That's all I will stand for.
I don't know. I just love them for some reason.
It's kind of nice to see data displayed in a different way.
Yeah.
It's very simple to be like, look at that. It's low, then high, or it's exactly the same. It's very easy to interpret.
Yeah. And I always imagine myself jumping from bar to bar.
Oh, do you?
Yeah. So just, I look at the bar graph and then I imagine my little self on top and be like, this is a big jump. This is a small jump. So just next time you see a bar graph, think of me jumping on them, because that's what I think of.
It's like every episode is sort of a door into the corner of your mind and how you see your job. It's really nice.
Right? It's sad. In each graph, so we have the 3 participants' graphs. Chris is on the top, Pat is in the middle, and Danny's on the lower end or the bottom of the graph. And there is a control bar and a test bar. And what we see, which is really nice, is low responding in all of the control conditions for Chris and Pat, and higher levels of trials with problem behavior in the attention and escape condition for Chris and Pat. For Danny, we do see some responding in the control condition, which might suggest that we didn't do a good job, or they didn't do a good job of figuring out what really the motivating operation was there. But that's okay.
Right. Or something about that was not maybe discriminable.
Right.
Yeah. And did they talk about the setup of the setup of their FA in terms of, did they use like the colored shirts?
Nope.
Different areas of class. So there was nothing that would clearly be discriminable for the child.
Nope. It was just in the regular scheduled activities.
Okay.
Yeah, and so one thing to note too, that you may have missed it if you were reading it in your car.
Don't do it, folks. Listen to the show instead. Read at home, then listen in the car.
The authors chose the maintaining variable with the highest levels and targeted those first. And then all other variables that had higher rates than the control condition were targeted after the study was completed. So, for instance, for Chris, he had higher levels of responding in the escape condition, and so that is the maintained variable they targeted for that FCT in the next portion.
But he also had some responding in attention.
Right, and so the attention was treated after they finished the study.
Oh. It was very responsible of them to let us know that and to follow through.
Yeah. That specifically. All other identified functions were addressed after the study. So that's nice.
And the itinerant teacher left town, never to treat those functions again.
She was like, "See you later, kids," and flew away on her umbrella.
But that attention-maintained behavior lingered and lingered.
Yeah, so we see responding was sensitive in most of the test conditions in our trial-based FA. We then move to treatment, where they again use the trial-based FA segment for baseline. And we see high rates of aggressive behavior for Chris and Danny, and high rates of tantrum behavior for Pat, and no alternative responses for any of the participants. Then, once we start doing FCT training plus extinction, we see a gradual decrease of aggressive behavior for Chris and a gradual increase of the alternative response. It's a little bit variable, but overall, we see an increasing trend. For Pat, similar results were found. We see a gradual reduction of tantrum behavior and a fairly moderate level of alternative responses being emitted in the FCT plus extinction condition. And Danny...
And almost immediately, too, for Pat. Like, once that... Was it a card?
Yep, it was a card.
Yeah. Once that was available, he started using it immediately.
Yeah, he was like, "I love this.
Yeah.
Wow! I don't have to throw myself on the floor anymore.
It's so much easier.
I can leave my tears for commercials." Just kidding. And then for Danny, we see again, too, an almost immediate decrease in problem behavior and an increase in alternative response. So, it worked!
It's a beaut.
And that's what they say. It worked!
Hooray, it worked! It results in discussion.
Right? So one nice thing, though, is the teacher served as a therapist here, and she was itinerant. But she was able to identify at least one function of problem behavior and successfully treat that function using FCT. So that's really nice. And yes, Rob?
Oh no, she was only involved as therapist. She didn't take part in any of the analysis that they laid out, did she? I know they explained why they were using the trial-based FA procedure. They gave her a lot of training to start, but she wasn't actively involved in the research itself, was she? At least as far as I didn't get the sense she was.
No, I think she ran all the sessions. Though.
Yes, but she wasn't looking at the graph. She didn't choose the treatment type. She was given all that information.
I think so.
Okay. I believe, yeah.
Yeah.
That's fine. It doesn't. I don't think it changes very much. It just.
So they do say, although the teacher did treat all functions successfully, we did not report those results because she did so in a less formal fashion than the methods we described.
Oh, okay.
So eventually she did.
So then she blew their research with the rest of her treatment.
But she did it. Way to go, you. Yeah, so I think this is a nice little successful report that can further build the literature showing that discrete trial FAs can be used in the classroom, can be used successfully, and may not be that difficult to run for someone that's not a trained behavior analyst.
Yeah, although she was,
she was in a master's program.
Studying for her special ed degree, and they probably gave her a fair amount of assistance in knowing what to do. But yeah, when they describe it this way, you're like, wow, that doesn't sound so difficult to implement.
No, and the graph is so easy to make. Like, everybody can make a bar graph.
Right.
Well, I mean, you'd like to think that everyone.
People learn how to make bar graphs in, 6th grade.
Did you ever get to do that? Where you get all the Lucky Charms?
Yeah, and you're like, how many rainbows?
Graph all your marshmallows you got?
We did that, too.
No, Rob?
I don't remember.
Poor schooling. Just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Rob went to special private school.
No.
They didn't let you have Lucky Charms.
No, sadly.
He had to count out different grains
You
Right.
use a graphing calculator
from like
only.
Kashi Good Friends.
Oats, barley, wheat,
Awesome.
quinoa.
I don't think they'd found the ancient grain quinoa. Wherever they dug up that ancient grain was not. They hadn't dug it yet.
That's awesome. But yeah, so I love this. I think that it'll be easy to replicate. I think that people, if they want to use this type of assessment in their classrooms, I think it might be a helpful way to treat problem behavior or assess problem behavior and then effectively treat it using function-based methods.
Yeah, I think that this is what we naturally do when you first come into, let's say you come into a classroom, you see a new student that you don't know much about. This is what you do. You ask the teacher, like, hey, try this out, see how they respond. Oh, okay, now don't do that anymore. Now try this. Give them a lot of attention, and now respond to them with attention, and now respond to them by removing the materials. You kind of try all these things out and feel it out kind of naturally. So this is, to me, a great extension of doing what we naturally do as behavior analysts anyway, except, doing what you should do, taking data, making a bar graph, and then going on to actually put a treatment into place based on your findings.
Did they follow a number of repetitions of how many times they had to present each test condition? I know some of the articles I've read on trial-based FAs have been, I think it's 10. They try to do 10 each condition. I'm not sure if it's the Sigafus and Sager. I'm not sure if they're original, if they had a number that they used as well. Can you refresh my memory? How many, was it the 10? Was it more than that?
So what I can say is Sigafus and Sagers in 1985 used 20 discrete trials under each of the 3 conditions over a 5-day period. So 4 trials under each condition were conducted per day.
Okay. So the Sigafus and Sagers was 20. In this article, did they replicate 20 or what?
Nope, they did 10 trials of each type that were conducted.
Okay.
So they only did 10.
I don't remember any explanation given for numbers at all. I'm not totally nuts. They just didn't talk about it.
Nope, they just said first, only 10 trials of each type were conducted.
So I'd be curious.
They were trying to streamline
Probably
what had been done previously.
Right.
Sure.
And Bloom and all did 20 actually.
They did. Because I know one of the things I remember when I first started hearing about trial-based FAs, probably around 2011, 2012, was they weren't coming out. The results weren't coming out as well as the standard FA. And I'm curious if number of repetitions would have anything to do with that, or if it was just a fluke, or sort of like, remember when they started switching FAs from the long sessions to 10-minute, does 10-minute session work, does a 5-minute session work, and they kind of both work, but 10's probably better. But most people do 5 if they have to do a full FA because they just don't have the time to do 10 minutes, and the thought is got to do something. I'm just curious if I don't know of any research that has looked specifically at number. I'd love to see
the
that.
trial-based FA?
Yeah, I would love to see a comparison of, do you get the same results with your 10 with your 20?
Yeah,
With
I don't know
more.
if that's been done.
No. I haven't looked into it too much outside of articles I've read in Java in the past year or so, but I would be curious about that, because that would certainly be helpful to know that 10 is totally fine, or results will be variable if you don't do 20. I don't know.
Well, here's the thing. If you're getting responding in a particular condition, then you've got a hit.
Mm-hmm.
And you could be getting responding in multiple conditions, but this type of study isn't really going to give you a difference in, frequency of response per condition. It's just one, regardless. So if you're getting hits in escape and attention every time, then likely they're both going to serve as reinforcers.
Right. So here's some modifications. So the Sigafus and Sagers 1995 did 1-minute tests and control, whereas Bloom 2011 and Lambert and colleagues did 2-minute segments. And Bloom and colleagues actually did 20 completed trials of each type, similar to Sigafus and Sagers. So I think that was a modification that Lambert and all made, is that they only did 10.
Mm-hmm.
But they got pretty distinct results between the different conditions with just 10 opportunities. So.
And that's what matters.
Yeah. And then they, use that reinforcer and were able to have behavior decrease by doing FCT with it. So it worked.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Yeah.
It would be nice to see the results of the other maintaining variables. I know there was a limitation, but it would have been cool to see.
I assume they would have reported if it wasn't successful or it wasn't as expected. Even if it wasn't up to the standards you'd be able to publish about.
Well, they said that, right? Like, the teacher was effectively able to decrease all the problem behavior, but she did so in a more loosey-goosey fashion.
Yeah. But that could also mean she did 10 different things at once, including FCT, which... Yeah, I think we've talked about that in previous episodes, how it's... Ugh. Don't do that.
Yeah.
Do one thing.
Well, if you want to publish it, do one thing.
Right.
Well, I think if you want to be able to tell people, here are your technological means of affecting behavioral change, you want to be able to say, this is the thing to do, or these are a few things to do. More research says just do this one or just do that one, because it is very easy to do 50 things and to get a change and then keep doing those 50 things forever.
Until it breaks.
That's the problem.
And then have to start all over again.
Well, that's the thing. And that's frustrating, especially when you're talking about any sort of public service. You're spending a lot of money to do these 50 things, and then if it all falls apart and you go, well, I don't know which of those was the one to fix, you're just wasting so much time and money.
True.
And it's very frustrating. And especially if you're dealing with specialists who are not behavior analysts, who are like, oh, well, I'm glad you have a reinforcement system where you're using FCT, but what about these weighted vests? Let's do that too. And then when everyone sees, oh, behavior went down, well, it's those weighted vests. We got to keep OT on here. We got to keep weighted vests on. Their IEP is an objective. Wear weighted vests all the time. And it's really hard to convince them it didn't work because they say, no, I say your graph. The rates of behavior go down. And then you got to do a component analysis. But nobody in their right mind is going to do a component analysis on behavior of a child in the applied setting whose behavior has gone down. They don't want to see that.
That's true. We're not all rich like Beyonce.
There you go.
You and Beyonce.
Girl.
I've been just talking about Beyonce a lot before this podcast, just so you guys know.
It's all right. Do it up.
Lemonade. Listen to it, guys.
Beyonce paid us a lot of money to say it.
Beyonce called us tonight, and they're like, who runs the world? Girls. Jackie, promote my album.
Jackie Sigafoos.
Jackie Sigafoos, promote my album. I actually haven't really listened to it. I've only seen snippets, but I'm going to when I get home tonight. You guys should too.
Okay. Well, let's speed that up. We want to get you home so you can listen to some Beyonce. Let's move on to our next article. Another extension of the trial-based FA. This one in a mainstream primary school classroom. Mainstream not being a word I typically hear very much anymore. But, Dinah, you're going to talk about how this extension of the trial-based FA methodology was run.
I am. And this is out of the University of South Wales. So maybe they use the term mainstream more.
I suppose, but...
You're Welsh.
Yeah, not in education, I'm not.
So this is Austin, Groves, Reynish, and Francis. And they were looking at doing a trial-based FA with 3 typically developing boys in the mainstream primary school classroom. So they were ages 5 to 8. Jacob was 5, Joe was 7, and Dylan was 8. And they all engaged in precisely the types of behavior that you would expect typically developing boys age 5 to 8 to engage in, which included calling out and...
the most pernicious of behaviors.
I know. And off-task behavior.
These rapscallions, oh my.
I know. So Dylan, who is 8, engaged in off-task behavior. Joe and Jacob engaged in calling out behavior, which included talking in a raised voice to teachers or peers without permission.
I sort of laugh. I know I kind of laughed at that, but the number of times teachers have specifically asked me to help them target calling out behavior, way more than any other behavior. And it's frustrating because then you watch them and it's like, well, you respond to them every time they call out. Why don't you try not doing that? Then I'll come back and do some sort of big assessment for you.
It's really hard, though.
It is hard.
When you have a kid who's calling out in class to not attend.
Especially if they get the answer right. So then everybody, gets mad at them.
Yeah.
That happened once when I was consulting.
Mm-hmm.
And, chances are what has happened, too, is that the teacher has tried to ignore it. and let it go on and on and on and on, and then finally responded and reinforced it.
Right.
Which is only going to strengthen the behavior because now it's being reinforced on an intermittent schedule.
I don't see that too often. Usually they just keep responding and responding and responding.
Okay. We don't know what happened here and what the history of the behavior was. We don't know what that was. But these were 3 boys for whom this warranted intervention. I guess we can at least say that. And I didn't define off-task behavior for Dylan, but that was 4 consecutive seconds of the student's gaze not being oriented toward the teacher, chalkboard, or materials. 4 seconds is all you get. That's not very long.
No, but...
It's long enough.
Yeah, for the purposes of
I'm staring off for 4 seconds now.
It's really
Seems
long,
like a
though.
long time.
I guess it's kind of long.
Yeah.
You count that out.
It's long enough. Okay. So anyway, they wanted to do an in-class assessment to see what might be maintaining these behaviors, and they had 3 potential variables that they wanted to look at, which included attention from the teacher, attention from a peer, and escape from demands. So the way that the session was set up was very similar to how Jackie already described. It was, again, a 2-minute session. The first half of the session was a control condition in which the putative reinforcer, so the proposed potential reinforcer, was freely available. In the attention condition, that was just the teacher providing attention. The peer attention condition, they had a period of time where they could talk to their partner. And then for the escape from demands, they couldn't fully remove demands because everyone else in the class was supposed to be doing something, so they gave them, the child in question, sort of like a preferred activity to do, like, oh, can you help me pass out these materials? But they weren't doing a hard task. And then for the second half, it was a test condition. So at that point, they removed access to the putative reinforcer, so the teacher stopped talking to them. They called the peer away so that now the child was alone, or they introduced the really challenging demand. And upon occurrence of the target behavior, the reinforcer for that condition was re-implemented, and they got 30 seconds of it. So attention from a teacher. For the peer one, if the child engaged in calling out, then they just sent the peer back over to them, and they said invariably the peer talked to the kid.
It was on program, though. They sort of hoped for the best.
Yeah, if it didn't happen, they didn't count that trial. And then for the demand condition, the teacher came over and actually removed the child's materials, which seems weird, but that's what they did.
Well, they talked a little bit about the idea that when they tried to run it like a real sort of demand condition, and they just completely take the demand away, the kids would get really mad about that or confused because no one ever did that in school. Where I'm not letting you do your work now. That just wasn't naturally occurring, and these were typically developing kids, so they were pretty aware of. Yeah,
they talk a lot about that at the end, which I think is really interesting. So we can totally touch on that. And then they were able to run this 8 to 11 times per day. They did 8 to 11 trials per day.
Wow.
Which is different because in your study, or Lambert et al., they did 10 a week, I think. So by doing 8 to 11 per day, they were able to bust out this whole thing, and they were finished in 3 to 4 days.
Bam!
I know.
That's quick.
I know, right? With the entire FA portion of it. So that was pretty awesome. And that was the preparation for the trial-based FA. They saw some nice results for everyone.
And they all lived happily ever after.
The end.
They had bar graphs.
Bar graph.
So how much did Jackie jump off these bar graphs, Nyla?
Well, she had to climb them pretty high because they had they have comparison bars for the control, responding in the control condition and responding in the test condition. So everyone's responding in the control condition when it was adult attention or escape was low. Everyone's responding in the test conditions for almost all of the categories, honestly, with the exception of Joe's escape, were relatively high and much higher than they were in the control condition. The other thing to keep in mind here, however, is that when we're looking at the peer attention condition, responding was high both in the control and in the test condition. So there's some work to be done there for sure.
But I believe this was the first time that someone had tried a peer condition in that regard.
I didn't talk about that.
It was brand
initially. New. But it's such a clearly important potential variable to look at when you're talking about a classroom full of 5 to 8-year-old boys.
Yeah. Especially calling out, which, like you said, Jackie, people, the children were actually responding to, not just the teacher.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's one of those things when you want to do like a really nice, simple, clean FA, and then you go in and you look at the situation and it's like, oh, this is so much messier than I thought it would be because all these kids are constantly responding to each other. Or to draw a parallel, when your children are fighting with one another and you can remove or withhold or represent your attention all you want to, but it doesn't matter because they have each other's attention.
That happens with my dogs, too.
Oh, yeah?
Not just with kids.
Yeah. It's super annoying. We could do a trial-based FA at home.
Ooh. Can we?
Maybe we'll do it and we'll put it on the website.
That's a great idea.
I do already have footage of my kids doing preference assessments in discrete trial, so I might as well.
In every presentation I've ever done, basically.
We're the most popular MSWO video on YouTube.
Okay, so for Dylan, they saw the highest levels of responding in the trial-based FA under the escape condition. For Joe, it was highest under adult attention, and for Jacob, it was highest under adult attention as well. But everyone had some level of responding in the peer attention condition, and then a little bit under escape, too. So what they did from there is that for their treatment component, they did want to see if they could reduce this level of behavior by implementing some type of function-based treatment. So for the treatment component, they wanted to take these data and then apply that to some type of function-based treatment. So they chose a DRO, which is a differential reinforcement of other behavior. And they looked at the 3 potential putative reinforcers that they had identified and chose 2 or 3 of those to implement as a DRO. So that's what they did next. They looked at initial levels of baseline when there was no programmed reinforcer in place. And then they did a multi-element comparison between a DRO for either attention and escape. For Dylan, for Joe, they looked at all 3, attention, escape, or peer attention. And then for Jacob, they looked at peer attention and adult attention. And looked to see which one of these different types of DRO procedures reduced behavior to the lowest levels. And they actually saw some different results for everyone. So for Dylan, he initially had some relatively high rates of responding for his off-task behavior. With the 2 types of DRO in place, adult attention or escape, both of them were reduced to quite low levels. However, escape was a little bit lower. For Joe, behavior was reduced for all 3 of the DRO conditions. However, adult attention, when that was provided, differentially, that reduced behavior to 0 rates. And then for Jacob, it was a comparison between peer attention and adult attention, and again, responding was reduced the most when adult attention was provided. So that was kind of interesting.
Did they say why they used a DRO instead of...
They wanted to pick something that was relatively easy to implement in the classroom, because these were the classroom teachers that they were using, which makes sense.
I think all the literature on trial-based FA is about how easy can we make this.
Right,
so.
Yeah, you're right. Okay.
No, you don't like the DROs?
I'm not a fan, to be honest. I'm not really a fan of DROs, only because you're not teaching anything. You're just throwing reinforcers out into the universe, and then they're not even reinforcers, right? Because you're not really even increasing behavior at all. You're just being like, look, you did not do something. Way to go, you.
Yeah. Who knows what you're really reinforcing.
Right. Yeah, there's so many bad things can happen.
So you're sort of praying you're reinforcing the general response class of good enough stuff.
Yeah, they're not my favorite. I'm just going to slap a DRO on it. I don't usually do that.
Put a bird on it. Put a DRO on it.
I don't do that.
If you liked it, you should have put a DRO on it.
Boom!
That's a callback.
Yeah!
Yo!
Woo! But no, I'm overall DRO methods, even if they're using the maintaining variable, they do not signify a function-based treatment for me.
No.
Yeah, and so I like using function-based treatments.
Right. It's a
cop-out. I tend to stay away from things that are not function-based treatments initially. It is easy, but to what end?
I don't know how many cooking shows that you watch.
None.
Oh, that's really too bad. But I've been watching a lot of
do.
MasterChef.
Okay.
And sometimes they will have like, I don't know what is in the ceiling, like barrels of things, and they'll be like, today you're cooking with raspberries, and then like they'll like open up these like giant vats, and all these raspberries will just pour down onto the floor. That is what a DRO feels like.
That seems
for
wasteful.
Me. Exactly, it's super wasteful. You're like wasting all your reinforcers.
They're gonna
just like
use
hoping
those, you know.
They can't use them. They're all over the floor.
Nah, it's fine. Don't worry about
5-second rule.
it.
I'm like,
You gotta put it in the oven. You're gonna kill all the germs.
Raspberries are expensive.
they are expensive.
Too, right? And like these things should be valuable. Adult attention should be valuable. Escape should be valuable. You shouldn't just be throwing it around and hoping that some of it lands in the right place.
So in that regard, would you consider these treatments not to be function-based treatments?
They're not function-based treatments.
So
They're using the hypothetical reinforcer. Great. I mean, that takes it one step closer to being function-based treatments. But in order for it to be a function-based treatment, you need to teach an appropriate response that's going to take the place of that problem behavior.
So instead of so would you say that instead of strengthening the case for the trial-based FA or for the specific protocol they put together, the use of the DRO doesn't really add anything to...
No, I think it does.
They've demonstrated that they can reduce the behavior
Right.
over time. And they did so, by informing their treatment with what was... It was almost like a preference assessment.
Yeah. Kind of.
Right?
Yeah.
So not necessarily as strong as say our last article where they were using FCT. They were teaching.
I prefer
a new
the
behavior.
FCT.
I do prefer it as well.
Yeah.
But I'm not discrediting this because it does show great results.
You hate this article is what you're saying.
No, I'm not discrediting it at all. But in clinical research, one should aim for function-based treatments, right? So that should be your first place. That should be your first stop on your trip to decreasing problem behavior.
Right.
So
Particularly since these were not dangerous behaviors at all.
Yeah.
Right? Now, this was done in the classroom by the classroom teacher. So there's a lot to be said for that.
Yeah.
And that this was something that they would be able to implement with a classroom full of kids. We should give them a lot of credit.
Absolutely.
Oh, sure.
I think.
Yeah.
So in that situation, DRO.
They're rocking it. Yeah. They're totally rocking it for where they're at.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't think too much on the DRO because when they explained we're just trying to find something that's informed by the function that is easy to implement in a real classroom. That I think that carries a lot of weight. Probably means that this is sort of unlike say the use of FCT. You'd probably want to run a lot more of these because like you said, Diane, it's more like a preference assessment than it is developing function-based treatment. So it's not quite as strong a case, but it is really promising to see how you can inform your treatment options at least.
Yeah.
But you probably want to have, if you're going to use DROs, well, let's get a lot of DROs because they're not necessarily telling us the same thing that, say, the FCT.
It's not really...
I'd rather teach him something.
Yeah.
I mean, we know now that Dylan's behavior is sensitive to escape from demand, right? We know that, and we can use that to our advantage by sort of making modifications to the environment. But we haven't taught him perhaps a better way of escaping. All we've done is make those changes on our end.
Right. One nice thing, though, is that they did social validity, and the teachers and teaching assistants loved it. They strongly agreed on every category, so that's nice.
They're also thinking that this is relatively easy to implement and
They're on
something that
board.
they could do.
Yeah.
Which is pretty huge.
There's the kids, too.
Yep.
Yeah,
that's
There's the kids
They
if they
did.
liked it.
And they liked it too.
And the kids liked it.
Well, I like the question. I like the program with the timer and rewards, and everybody said maybe. That's funny. But all of them said I would use the program again to help me do better, even if I didn't get a reward. Everyone says yeah.
Nice. Yeah. And then the other thing I really liked in the discussion of this article is what you were referencing earlier, Rob, is how you can go about doing something like this in a classroom with typically developing kids and not risk the results of your assessment based on participant reactivity to the assessment. So they did this kind of on the sly. Like, the kids didn't really realize that anything was being modified for them. And I thought that was really cool. And they kind of broke down some of the different aspects of that.
Well, if you took a typically developing student out of the classroom and said, oh, we're going to go in here and play with these toys, and then I'm going to read a magazine and not pay attention to, they would just I don't think their behavior would change across any of the conditions. They'd just
They'd
be
say,
really
"Okay."
confused and be like, oh, I'll just sit here, I guess.
No, they say, well, that's what you told me to do,
Yeah.
so I'm just going to be over here
Yeah.
till you come get me, because I follow rule-governed
Yeah.
behavior.
I like that. We also have observed children asking their teachers why they keep taking away their work.
Yeah.
Right.
The teacher implemented an escape condition.
Yeah, they've observed students asking the researchers why she keeps talking to him when he gets out of his seat.
Like, you're being weird, teacher.
Yeah.
So the standard FA procedure is creeping out the kids.
I think it would creep me out, too, if you think about it.
Yeah, so the way that they were able to implement this and also incorporate the peer into the assessment was really cool. And something that hadn't been done previously. So to me, that is a really great takeaway from this study, that you could do something like this in a regular classroom.
Yeah. So do you have any suggestions or ideas how you might try to clean up the response that they had in the peer attention condition, in the sense that the control, the rate of problem behavior was pretty high in the control, and then it was pretty high in the test condition, I think, for at least 2 of the participants, but it wasn't as low in control. How you might, would there be a way to make those more discriminable? They can't be, based on the fact that they're peer-to-peer relationships, which is just a kind of a different brand of attention. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that they mentioned is perhaps even though they had the peer's attention during the control, perhaps they were trying to get a particular type of attention from the peer, such as making the peer laugh. So you can't, necessarily do that in that short period of time. So maybe they were continuing to try and get the peer to respond in a particular way, which completely makes sense. Mm-hmm. Or if their peer's a buddy, then they're going to be doing what they normally do with them, because they might be funny kids, doing this type of thing.
So it may just be sort of the expected shape of that bar graph for peers.
It might be.
Peer interaction is so tough.
Right. Unless you have a really awesome peer in the control that can focus well, and if you find maybe a highly preferred item for that one peer, the control peer, the Confederate peer, so they'll be less likely to engage with the other peer. Mm-hmm. So that's one way you could do it, but that's going to be kind of hard, because then they might even be like, look at me play this video game.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But maybe not. Like, sometimes.
And they were trying to have this be relatively uncontrolled and natural looking,
so that's
for the
hard.
peer interaction too. So it makes sense to me that they would still be, and particularly the calling out to guys, they would still be doing that even though their peer's still there, because maybe they're trying to get his attention.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And they didn't really have peer Confederates the same way, because the peer was just they were
just a kid in the class.
Some kid. They weren't like, don't remember.
Yeah.
When I do this, don't say a word, or make sure you give them attention.
There was no behavioral skills training for the peer.
No.
Which I like. I actually appreciate that.
Well, it's really hard to get that level of permission. I've had plenty of students where you're trying to teach a social skill, and there's a lot of research showing that, peer Confederates are very effective when you're trying to teach social skills to, children with autism, and just getting permission to, like, hey, could I have this kid be a part of this protocol I'm putting in place where they have to know exactly what I'm doing, and they have to know these signals, and nobody wants to sign that permission form. Nobody wants to pull the kid out of class. And it's really, not nobody, but it is very, very hard to make a case as to why all this time should be spent having a child who is not disabled, who does not have an IEP, to come learn all these things. It just doesn't make sense to the people you would need permission from.
I would.
I would too. So I'll hire you.
Yeah. If I ever have a kid, you can use my dogs anytime.
Okay. Dog, I need you to give this child attention when he calls out to you.
When he calls out to you, sit, lay
when
down,
I give the signal,
and roll over.
If it's the blue tabletop, don't give him any attention.
Oh
okay?
no, you're colorblind.
Do you understand that, dog? This is one of the limitations of my study. Use of dog peer.
Dog peer.
Dog peer. Our kids have been in tons of studies.
Yeah, that's unfortunately not everybody you deal with has their parents are BCBAs, which is sad. Our field needs to do better at having more children, I guess, so we can be in research studies.
It's funny.
Come on, people, get on it.
Whoa! Literally.
Yeah.
I'm done.
This
Okay.
We really learned a lot. I do want to mention, although we had said that we wish they'd use function-based treatments, one of their limitations was that they used the DRO. So they also recognized that it wasn't the best, but it was the best for what they could do at that moment.
Yeah.
So I'm all on board with them, but I did want to say that we weren't like being like, "Oh, you guys suck," because they also said that.
Well, we weren't. I don't know about you, Jackie.
Right.
You were pretty critical.
But we weren't saying that at all. So they also recognized that in an ideal world, it would have been awesome if they could do some function-based treatments.
Yeah.
At
But
the
like,
end.
good on you for even trying to do this
Right. Yeah.
in the classroom.
Rock on, Jennifer.
Yeah. When I first read this, my initial thought was, where do you get the teachers who are willing to go through this process?
Right. Well, I bet there's some teachers out there that would want to do this.
So they described the teachers, at least in this article, that were willing to do that.
Yes. So one of them had been trained by the researchers to implement the good behavior game, and the other one was not trained in any way. Is what it says. So at least one of the teachers in the classroom was relatively familiar with some behavior analytic concepts and how you might implement those in the classroom. So maybe that person was willing to go through this. And I know they were trying to make it, relatively painless for the teachers in the classroom, and I think they did a good job of that. But, from what you tell me, Rob, trying to implement anything like this in a typically developing classroom seems challenging.
Yeah, it can be.
So, the good behavior game, if people don't know what it is a class-wide approach to the management of classroom behaviors that reward children for displaying appropriate on-task behavior during instructional times. So the class will be divided into 2 teams, and a point is given to a team for any inappropriate behavior displayed by one of its members. So the team with the fewest number of points at the game's conclusion each day wins a group reward. So it seems pretty fun.
Like a good
I
group
think
contingency.
the professors at Hogwarts should probably take a lesson from that, because they just gave out points like at random.
Oh, but they were probably more points, right? So you don't want to get points. You want to have the fewest amount of points. In
They
the good
did give
behavior
out
game.
points, but it was like you might get like 50 points one day, or like only 10 points.
They were not well defined, and there was a lot more response cost, I think, than there was actual reinforcement.
At Hogwarts?
They didn't wait. Well, they didn't weight the points. Hey, good job. I think Harry Potter, you saved the school. You get a bazillion points. Oh no, I don't like you. Lose 100 points. Man, is really a
10 points for Gryffindor.
yeah.
I don't know. I don't know this.
You
That-
don't?
Well,
No.
Oh.
I know. I gotta get on board.
I think that's why Hogwarts blew up or whatever happened. Did Hogwarts blow up? I don't
I've only
remember.
made it to book 4, so don't tell me.
Oh, okay.
I've made it to 0 books and 0 movies. But someday. I think I actually saw the first one.
I hope so.
Maybe not. I'm gonna watch them
I think you'd be in Gryffindor.
next weekend.
I think I'd be in Hufflepuff.
Aww.
Again, don't know
Rob.
what any of this means.
There's 4 different schools that you go. Well, you're in the wizard school and you go to 4 different houses.
Oh, okay.
And one is for the kids who are the smart kids, and one is for the kids who are doofy. I don't really know.
Kind of like Dumpy Kids.
Yeah.
That's the Hufflepuff one.
Oh,
There's
you're
one-
not dumpy.
Oh, gee, thanks.
I think you're a smart kid.
Thank you.
I want to be the athletic group.
Well, then
There is
there's
no
the
athletic group.
there's the
They're
evil
wizards.
kids, and then there's the hero kids.
I want to be the evil kid.
I totally
You're
be
not,
the evil
well,
kid.
Rob
though.
is definitely, that's Slytherin.
Yeah.
Rob's in Slytherin.
That's
I
right.
think that you're in the hero group.
Oh.
It's like brave, trustworthy.
Yes.
I wouldn't have supported the evil wizards or anything, though. I just believe that the ends justify
Yeah.
the means.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Which leads us to bring us right into our Hogwarts.
Hogwarts, there's a special train you can take.
Oh, where does it
Let's
lead
jump
us?
on the Hogwarts Express to Dissemination Station. Hello, hello, hello. It's me, Harry Potter. Tell me about behavior analysis.
That sounded horrible.
That's my British accent.
That sounded
It's
real
a
bad.
British accent. I could do a whole bunch.
It's,
Check my resume.
Pretty sure nobody's going to check your resume.
Hey, Rob.
They really should. I'm not qualified to be on the show.
hey, Rob.
Hey.
What's the secret password?
Oh, well, if you want to get on my special train, you need the secret password. I'll stop now. The secret password, a second secret password, is baseball. Yes, America's pastime. Actually, nobody likes baseball anymore.
I do.
Okay, Jackie's favorite pastime, baseball. 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 All right, so now you know our code words, but please finish up the episode with us as we continue on in Dissemination Station. We got through Password Tunnel, and now it's time to talk more. So, Jackie, I wanted to come back to your point concerning school assessment in general.
Sure.
And the use of trial-based FA.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about it.
So you've been in situations where when you've consulted, the school has said, we need a behavior plan for this kid. And you being a good behavior analyst have said, I need to come up with a function-based treatment.
Right.
To develop a function-based treatment, I could guess and look at data, or I could do an assessment, but there were some roadblocks.
Yeah, so this was before I got my PhD. So I was just a young fledgling behavior analyst, and I was working at a school as a consultant, and I came in and everyone hated me. Like, legitimately, like, there was, like, daggers in their eyes.
That's
when
the worst
I came
feeling.
in. Yeah, and so I was there for one.
Did the school hire you as a consultant, or the parents of a student hired you as a consultant?
The parents hired me.
Oh, yeah.
Because the school was going to kick the student out.
Oh, yeah, they totally would have hated you then.
Yeah, they hated me so much. Everybody hated me. It was the first time in my life. I'm just kidding. But, so I went in and I did some observations in the classroom, wanted to run a functional analysis, and I was like, I know what I'm doing, and had like this was like right out of passing my BCBA exam.
It's the best time when
yeah.
you're like, I don't know what I don't know.
Yeah. And I was like, we're going to run a functional analysis. And the school was like, no, we do not believe in functional analyses. We don't believe in taking this.
Also great.
Yeah. We don't believe in taking the student out of class time.
So they would never run any evaluation whatsoever, including educational evaluations, in which they do pull kids out of classrooms?
I'm not sure, because I wasn't part of that.
We should name names.
Yeah.
District blank, you're the worst.
And so it wasn't in this state.
It's a twist.
But so then I had to come up with a clever way to run the assessment, my functional analysis, in the classroom and not call it a functional analysis. So I looked. One good thing I did, I guess, as an early on behavior analyst, is I looked to the research and found the Sigafus and Sager article from 95, and I was like, oh, I'm going to run this assessment during regularly scheduled activities and just see what happens, and the problem behavior will probably occur just as much as it, if not less, than it is right now. And so I was like, it'll take 8 minutes a day. It sounds like an infomercial, right? 8 minutes a day for 2 weeks, and problem behavior will be decreased. Check your waistline. It'll be so little. And so that's how I effectively did my functional
the shake
analysis.
weight.
Yeah. I love the shake weight. It came in white and pink and black. And that's how I effectively ran a functional analysis without calling it a functional analysis, but called it assessment.
Oh.
Well, here's the thing. Behavior happens.
Right.
Right? All day, every day. So you might as well do a few little manipulations, which naturally occur throughout the day anyway, to see what could happen.
Right. And I had parental consent to do an assessment. I did not have school's consent to do a functional analysis as described by Watt and colleagues.
Which you did
in
not
94,
do.
which I did not do. So I did not break any laws.
Yes. The issue that comes up with an evaluation, or if a parent asks for an evaluation, you have to do an evaluation.
Right.
But one of the areas, I think one of the reasons that you want to have all the paperwork in terms of evaluation is because you are potentially taking a child out of school, pretty much, to do your assessment. And then I think the question then comes up is how much of that is just legally you're removing the child from their free and appropriate public education versus how much should we be careful about doing assessments on children without informed consent of all around us. I know this comes up a lot because I get asked to do a lot of FBAs. And my first response is, what a waste of time. Why don't I just watch the kid for 5 minutes and then write a behavior plan? It's just going to be as good as the 3 to 4 weeks it'll take me to interview everybody and beg the teacher to please try testing these hypotheses with me, and they don't do it correctly, and then I got a bunch of crap data I can't use, and then I have a paraprofessional take ABC data that's worthless because it's impossible to take good ABC data no matter how good you are at it, and then I read a report that comes up with pretty much exactly what I could have told them a month before.
You could run this assessment.
Well, and that's one of the things that and Dinah, you and I had this conversation of, when asked to do an FBA, why not just do this every time? If you're a behavior analyst, you want to do an Iwata et al. Functional analysis. The odds of that, either working time wise or even working appropriate in terms of appropriateness.
Right.
If you're working with kids who are not children with autism or children with severe disabilities,
like
where
the typically
you might see
developing
this.
Kids. Why are you taking my work away?
Right.
Why are you talking to me every time I get up?
Yeah, you need something else, and sort of the standard. I think the way that FBAs are usually described, it's a lot of interview. It's a lot of good kind of psychological interview questions, followed by hopefully some amount of hypothesis testing. Mm-hmm. But there's no legal requirement to. I mean, I could just be like, check a box. Which one of these is your function? And legally, in the state of Massachusetts, at least, I could call that an FBA. There's no wording around it unless they change that law.
No, that's actually very true. There's a really great study that I'm going to look up hopefully right now that looked at the usage of FBA, because across all 50 states, there's a requirement now that FBAs have to be completed.
Mm-hmm. Who came up with this term?
Oh, who knows?
FBA? I don't know. It does seem like one of those terms.
It's not from the behavior analytic literature.
It was made up to.
It's so annoying.
Sound less scary. I don't know.
But what they found when they looked at this article, when they looked at across this, I think it was one specific state, and looked at how many FBAs were completed, what they consisted of, and if they had treatments that corresponded to the results of the FBA, and it was so low. It was like below 20%.
Yeah.
That they had an FBA. I'm using my little quotation marks right now.
Air quotes.
They had completed an FBA, but the treatment that they had in place in the classroom had nothing to do with the results of the FBA. And I actually see this sometimes when I have students do let's make a practice treatment plan, and they're like, I'm gonna put a token board in there, and I'm like, no. What? So I think this is very common, even with us, even with behavior analysts, that they're like, oh, let's slap a DRO on it instead of thinking about what we could do to increase appropriate behavior as well.
Yeah. Well, if you're just doing an interview and descriptive data, then why would one think that you have come across the proper function of the behavior?
And I did a workshop, I think, at the Babbitt conference a couple years ago. It was a nice workshop on how to do a good FBA, and it was really helpful to learn how to do a good interview, because I think it is very easy to be like, what's the problem? What's the problem I'm even trying to analyze? And you ask two different people, and they go on for 30 minutes, and they say nothing of substance. There's nothing observable. There's nothing measurable. They're just general anecdotes about behavior. And it was nice to have strategies that weren't like, no. But what's the behavior?
Right.
Could you please tell me the? So it was really nice to have that structured interview. But then it sort of fell into, and then you could do some hypothesis testing. But that's easier said than done. Of all the sort of, I think, the ways, I think most people think of an FBA as sort of, well, you do some data collection, you do some structured interviews, you do some observation, maybe you do some basic hypothesis testing. I have had one teacher who, God bless her, when I said, you need to ignore this child's behavior for the next 10 minutes, she ignored that child's behavior. And it was much more helpful than most of the time when I ask teachers, I need to try to test a hypothesis. Could you please respond the following way when behavior occurs? And they're 50-50 whether they do it or not. And it's like, well, I might as well have just not even asked you to do this. And it's, it's hard for teachers if they don't understand why they're doing it, or like in your case, Jackie, they don't want you there, or they don't understand what the point of what you're doing is. You get really terrible and worthless results, but you're still on the hook to write up a report. And it better be 5 to 10 pages long, or no one will believe that you did anything. In fact, it could be 30 pages long. You really didn't do anything. I read a lot.
You wrote a 30-page paper.
I read a lot of FBAs, and they are very much terrible ABC data, some observational notes that are 5 pages of just talking about stuff. poorly defined behavior. I see anxiety, and then descriptions that are all very mentalistic and not at all helpful. And then in the end, they come up with, let's do a token board and some sort of a DRO procedure. Which, I mean, if you're just going to do something, save yourself the 3 to 4 weeks it takes to put something together. Just slap a DRO on it. I mean, it's not necessarily the best, but hey, at least you did a treatment that may or may not be useful, and it only took you 5 seconds to put it together. Yeah. At least you could look at your results.
I mean, reinforcement will get you somewhere.
Yeah, you're going to be doing something.
So here's a question. So let's say you were doing a trial-based FA, such as this, and you were able to set up the right parameters for it, and then behavior occurred, and the teacher didn't respond according to what you were asking for, right? So like in the one I was talking about, they provide a minute of attention, they then remove attention, and then the minute the behavior occurs, attention comes back, right? So if we could just get the initial parameters established and not worry about the teacher response that needs to happen following the behavior, would we still get the same types of results that we would see here, but not require treatment integrity on the part of the teacher in the classroom?
You mean if you didn't know what the teacher did and you just looked at the results?
If they weren't consistent following the first occurrence of behavior and applying the 30 seconds of the putative reinforcer that we were looking for.
Well, in this,
like attention or escape.
Are you asking what would happen if no one was watching the teacher and they kept screwing up?
I'm asking, would you continue to see responding occur underneath those conditions if the reinforcer weren't being provided upon the occurrence of the behavior?
You might. I mean,
it's just a one-time occurrence.
Right. And I think that's why they combine all the trials together to get the percentage of the trials.
Yeah.
And if it was never occurring, if you never provided reinforcer, I mean, hypothetically, the teacher has to do something in order to manipulate the MO, right? So they either have to be ignoring, so the teacher has to do something right. So they have to either...
in order for it to move from the control condition to the test condition.
So the teacher behavior has to be under the control of at least the MO. But with the reinforcer, it might not necessarily matter because it's being reinforced hypothetically in the natural environment.
Right. Exactly.
That's what you're saying.
Yes. That is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I'm there.
Okay.
So I think if you had to be as loosey-goosey as possible, it may not matter if reinforcement's following every instance, but you need to have appropriate teacher behavior at the start of each segment to signal what is occurring during that segment. But if they're not reinforcing every response, then the segment's going longer than it should.
Well, I'm wondering if you could just not worry about what happens following behavior. Like a latency FA.
Okay. Right, but latency FAs still end upon the first occurrence of the behavior.
Yeah, which would be fine. Saying if you can't get the procedural integrity from the classroom teacher.
Oh, yeah. So if you get them to do it right in the beginning, then maybe you end. It doesn't really necessarily matter what they're doing, but then you just take latency to respond.
Yeah.
Ooh, so this is a cool research extenuation using the trial-based FA, but a latency design.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm there.
So to not worry about as much about procedural integrity for the classroom teacher.
Except for that first part.
Except for the first part.
Because you have to have that there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, this would be good.
But I think you'd still be looking at... someone would have to be recording the latency data.
Yeah.
So for it to be, I think, applicable...
Or even just occurrence, non-occurrence.
Would that still give you the results you'd be looking for if it was just happen, not happen?
It could.
That's the question.
Yeah, it could, and I'm wondering if it could because hypothetically the behavior's reinforced in the natural setting.
Right.
Right, because you've arranged your conditions to be as naturalistic as possible, and it doesn't necessarily matter if the reinforcer's following it because the segment's not extenuated.
Yeah.
So you need a control.
You need a control, and then
you would
test.
just do the tip, but the test would look. Like we wouldn't care what the teacher does in the test. We would just have time to behavior.
Yeah.
With a cap.
With a cap. And the teacher behavior at the beginning has to... I'm going to just keep
so the
saying
teacher
it
would
a zillion
still
times.
need to understand, I need to provide attention for 1 minute and stop.
At that point, though, if they're able to understand the MO in the control condition, I don't think it's much of a stretch for them to then follow through in the test condition.
Maybe they only do one thing. You don't know. Maybe they're like, I'll do
your assessment, but I'll only do 3 things of 6 correctly. More than that, the union is not paying me enough.
I'm pretty sure that I've heard that before, so...
That specifically?
Yeah.
Listen, I like your control condition, but your test, I'm throwing that out the window.
It's junk, Jackie.
I'll respond however I want.
Your test is junk. That's funny.
I would be curious. I think anything that allows for the use of something that is as close to, kind of our gold standard functional analysis as possible in as wide a set of environments and as wide a set of assessors as possible is ideal for disseminating the idea of function-based treatments. Because if you tell people, here you have to do a billion things to find the function and to then come up with a treatment, and here are the that's just a lot. That's a lot to do.
At the end of the day, all of the work that we're doing in functional analyses is an assessment. We're just trying to find the function of the behavior.
Right.
If it's taking months, and then at the end of all of that, all you have is a proposed function, you haven't even started applying a treatment yet to see if behavior is going to decrease. That's too long. It's much too long.
Too long.
And no one wants to take, it could take anywhere from 3 to 4 weeks, and I have to take this child out for, about at least 40 minutes a day, but maybe I even want to do 2 rotations of my conditions, or maybe we're talking about an hour and a half a day. No one wants that to go on for more than a few days before they're going to say, aren't you finished?
Yeah.
And they don't want to hear, well, I haven't gotten the differentiation I thought I would get in the results yet, so here's my next modification. Nobody wants to hear that. They want to say, do the test. I want it to be done in a week, and you're going to tell me exactly what I need to know. Which I think is why FBAs are so, as sort of the generic term for an assessment, are so palatable to so many folk, because as far as they know, it's, I'm going to give someone a sheet that says A, B, C, and there's little check boxes everywhere, and then I'm going to watch a kid for 20 minutes, and then I'm going to write a whole bunch of other words, and ta-da, I'm finished with this long report that means nothing.
I do think there's a lot to be said for a really informed interview.
Yes.
I don't want to be discounted.
No. I love interviews.
That's the best. I think that is the best part in terms of any work I've done with FBA, is learning how to do a better informed interview, because it is so relevant to getting they're very hard to do, and it's so relevant in terms of what do you want to use. So you're going to use a trial-based FA. Well, you have to have a sense of what are my conditions. You can just pick the standard ones,
right?
But especially in school setting, you may not.
That's when you get those long undifferentiated FAs, when you haven't hit on the right conditions to be testing, which is where an interview will help you.
Exactly. So structured interview, good. Generic ABC data, FBA descriptive analysis, bad. And perhaps trial-based FA is a nice way to provide. I know for me, from now on, when anyone says you got to do an FBA, I'm going to be looking at, can I use the trial-based FA protocol? One of these modifications of a protocol, because I'm not pulling a child out of school, which is nice, but I'm also getting a sense of function rather than just sort of making a best guess. And I think my best guesses are pretty good. I've done this for a while, but I know they're not the same as doing an actual assessment that determines function.
Mm-hmm. And both of these examples were being done in the larger classroom setting, but you could do something similar when your student's working one-to-one as well, but keeping them in the classroom and just making modifications.
Well, but again, if a student's working one-to-one in a classroom, that's their typical classroom environment. You just it would look more like a standard FA in that case. It would just be easier to do in terms of time. I know I've tried to show this protocol
it's less
to people.
Artificial.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you.
That's fine.
It's less artificial for the student as well. So if they're in their natural environment and they're able to, perhaps more easily relate the test condition to their natural day, then you might be more likely to see problem behavior occur.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think we've said a good amount on trial-based FAs. There's probably more to go over in terms of how do they compare to standard FA. I know there's been some debate there in previous years, although I think a lot of these studies that look at the treatment or informed treatment, at least in the case of the DRO, have been getting better and better results. And
That's
at
what
the end of the day,
matters.
the results of the behavior change are what matter.
Yeah.
So, more to look at in the future, but I think it's definitely very promising, which is nice. Well,
I love it.
you just like the bar graphs, Jackie. Admit it. Admit it.
Imagining jumping on the bar
I do. I
graph.
picture you now with a little pickaxe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bow.
Climbing up.
Bow, bow. Like that. I'll be like, sound like Mario.
It's like Blue's Clues when you.
I'm Mario.
It's so hard to say.
Here we go.
Oh, yeah, get that.
Here we go. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. That's the sound I make when I jump.
Well, let's go play Mario Brothers. That's enough of this podcast. Come
Yeah.
on, everybody. Well, everyone, sorry you can't join us, but at least you got to enjoy this episode, or we hope you did. Hey, you know what? If you did or didn't, why not leave us a review on iTunes? We're ABA Inside Track. You can find us pretty much everywhere online as ABA Inside Track, on Facebook, on Twitter.
You can subscribe to us on iTunes, or you can send us an email with suggestions, other ideas, or your comments at abainsidetrack@gmail.com.
That's right. And if you do send us an email, we'll always respond. But if people send us emails with some interesting thoughts or ideas for topics, we will happily read them on the air at our preview episode. So, Jackie, before we go, I know you have something that you'd like to inform the listeners about as well.
Yeah, so I have two things I want to inform people about. First off, I want to congratulate my newly minted master's students and the Applied Behavior Analysis program at Regis College. We have 10 graduates graduating this month. Way to go, guys. You did it.
Congratulations.
I'm so proud of you. I know you're listening because you tell me every day. So yeah, way to go, you guys.
If you really are listening, I want you to go up to Jackie the next time you see her and go, Shazbat, what a great episode. Because if you don't do it, she knows you're lying.
That's
And she will
awesome.
take away your master's degree. No, I don't know if you can do that. Can you do that?
No.
No.
But
You can
if-
physically steal it from them.
I could
though.
physically go to their house and steal it from their wall. Yep, I will do that. But if anyone else is interested in a career in behavior analysis, check out our master's program. We have a master's in applied behavior analysis at Regis College. We have a part-time and full-time option available. Check us out at regiscollege.edu.
Excellent. Well, thanks, Jackie. And congratulations to those master students. We are all about getting more and more people into the field. Well, that's it for us this week. We'll be back next week with a preview episode talking about our next exciting topic. But until then, I just want to make sure to thank again my lovely co-hosts. Thank you very much, Diana and Jackie.
Thank
You're very welcome.
Thanks, Rob.
It's very breathy, Jackie.
Thanks, Rob.
Did you like run up a hill before you think?
I'm really tired.
She's repelling. She's repelling.
I'm repelling off my bar graphs. I'm tired.
Everyone else will see you next week. But remember, until then, keep responding.
Keep responding.
Bye.